Okay, so I'm going to attempt to finish the social contagion beast of a thing today, and sponsored by Coca-Cola. All right. Actually, so we did a fun thing. We put Coke and Pepsi into. We found every tweet that had Coke and Pepsi somewhere in them for 2013, and then did one of these word diff things. So we measured their happiness, right? The words around those words, without thing. And so Pepsi's happier if you take out the word Coke and Pepsi. So Pepsi's happier. However, this is the thing we kind of I thought might happen. When you look at the words contributing to Pepsi's happiness and kind of going against it and all those things, there's all this stuff about cocaine and drugs and, right? So Coke's ambient, word space in just a sort of naive way has some kind of things that aren't about, pure happiness. Well, they kind of are, but in a different way, right? They're talking about something else, yeah. So Pepsi, though, is a really rock-solid kind of thing. Pepsi is Pepsi. Anyway, it was kind of it's a fun thing. I think we'll have to put up as a blog post, sort of a warning about using words in naive ways, which and that's our thing. We show the words, and you can see, okay, that's not really what you were going for. Okay. Right. Wikipedia page. Right, the secret ingredient is sugar. Actually, well, no, can I see it? Oh, we're getting the double dose. This one for me? Yeah, it's got the HF. I'm not going to shake it up. I understand how these things work. It's got the high fructose corn syrup, which is good to see. Because they care about you. You're right, you go to Mexico, it's sugar, and Australia, it's sugar, because there's an abundance of sugar, because that's the cheapest sugar. If it was squeezed dates, they put that in there. Anyway, I'm just saying. Okay, all right. So this is a woodpecker. Okay, excellent woodpecker, which they're in my backyard. And I have a pileated woodpecker, is that what we've got? What is it? What is it? I just wanted to say pileated, because it feels like I was... they've got the stuff. The Woody woodpecker thing? The cartoon Woody? Yeah. Damn. Oh, but they see this one, it's not that sort of thing. Yeah. Maybe they could put a little disguise on. This was good. You can see it's got success. Wow, what's it doing? It's good something. I don't know if it's good. These things have real ADD. I mean, they bounce all over the place. It's kind of nuts. It was. Well, I mean, they can definitely. They can. I don't know, but would you try to eat a jackhammer? I mean, it would be really bad going down. I mean, yeah. This is cute. Should we put this up? These are tweets, quality tweets coming out of here. This is a great discovery by humans, is that if you dress up a little robot as a baby penguin, you can infiltrate the team. And they tried different little suits or something, but this and then they're like, let's put a chick in there, and it works. And they'll snuggle up to it and try to talk to it. I don't know if they've tried to feed it, but anyway, this is this great discovery. It's the future of So we just have to work up to serviceable androids for humans, right? That's what we'll get to that. Oh, I guess we can watch videos. Anyway, pretty good. So that's cool. No, this would be great video too. You could have fake penguin cam. I mean, it would be really. What's that? Oh, the future of ecology. I mean, it's a huge win for ecology. I mean, that's just going to rope in all sorts of grade 3 and 4, and me. I'm going to do it now. Okay, so this one's about metaphors, which is good. This is a piece. I don't know if you could, but it's linked here. It's a podcast. XKCD, good value. This character. Bit about cities. What else? Yeah. All right. So we're good. Birds are always fun. High quality things. Okay. Yeah, those the woodpeckers, right? They have some really good stuff in there to keep the brain from. I think so. That was pretty packed. Yeah. The bird brain thing is pretty nasty, right? That whole, well, you know, someone you say someone is, they're kind of a bird. I mean, it's an aspersion, right? But there's a lot packed in. Like a crow can do a lot of things with just this little bit of physical computational space. I mean, we only have a couple of 3 pounds. It's not much. That's not like, here is your supercomputer. It's like a little blob of goop, you know. Thank you. Where's the keyboard? Anyway, we can do funny things. Okay, so let's see. So, okay, right. So just to quickly get back to where we were, we had this mean field model. So everyone is watching everyone else. Somehow you're getting a signal for everyone else, what they're doing. Could be through the media, or you're the NSA. But it's the idea that individuals are somehow getting a signal from everyone else. They have a threshold response function as to whether they adopt a behavior. There's a distribution of these on thresholds. And we kind of argued that if you take an integral of this PDF, this probability distribution function, then you get CDF, and that is the iterative map that one uses to see where these things go. And this is a critical mass model. If you start below this unstable fixed point, the social mechanism, the imitation mechanism drops away to 0, and if you start above, it takes off. So, you know, and then we have, so here's another example. This is again critical mass, and it's really about this slope here. We'll talk about this today, the slope of 0 as to whether something very small can take off. So that's always a big deal. Like, can a little, you know, and we have nice, fun governments over the centuries and millennia have said things like no gathering in groups of 3, right? Those sorts of things. No one's allowed to, but very physical sorts of statements. On airplanes, you know, no one's allowed to get together in groups of 2 or 3. Sometimes you hear this sort of thing. And they're worried about this, you know, taking over, and their lovely dictatorship falls down. But you can see the changes in this distribution, a little bit of movement here, people become you know, more susceptible or less susceptible, can move that slope. So this gives you a story as to why something could just explode. Nothing's happened, like nothing takes off, nothing takes off, nothing takes off. And then you have, you know, Nazi Germany, right? I mean, it's, or whatever it is. I mean, there have been big transitions in the history of humans. You know, suddenly everyone's okay, and now they're all, you know, picking up bad things and doing bad things to each other. Or they could all become moral things. Okay. You know, and again, varying this underlying distribution, many gullible, many resistant, you can get something else which is, it always takes off in this case, but there's sort of a fixed mass that will adopt a behavior. All right, so what we're going to do today is talk about networks, and there are a couple of pieces to that. The big stories were, if you see collective uniformity, it does not at all imply that everyone's the same. That's the easy narrative to tell. It's the natural one, the first one you think of. Oh, they all, you know, this group all hate, everyone individually hates this group, but they could all be sort of just holding themselves together socially. All right. And the second one is what I just said. So small changes in the underlying distribution of people's beliefs and behaviors could lead to very abrupt global changes. So that's a phase transition kind of story, right? All right, so lots of interesting things come up when we go to networks. And the main paper, so it's Duncan, and actually when I was at MIT, he was there as a postdoc, so I talked to him a little bit at the time. It took a few years to get this published, but it's become a big deal. Probably has 1,000, I think it has 1,000 citations. And if you read, and I encourage you to read all, look at these papers if you're interested, dig into them. It's PNAS, Murray Gell-Mann is the person who communicated this one, so the Quarkmeister. And one of the starters of the Santa Fe Institute. Let's see, so you can read sort of the front part of it, which you can see is just all this extra structure added to fight reviewers off. It's not this thing that you said it would be, or you're thinking, it's not percolation, that you very clearly sometimes in papers you say, oh, okay, they put this in for a reviewer, because this doesn't make any sense. Anyway. Yeah, the classic thing for reviewers is to say, you should have cited these papers, and these papers, and these papers. And you're like, thank you for telling us who you are, you terrible person. And I hate the peer review thing. All right. It really does happen, and it's really awful, because you kind of just have to do it, because they're anonymous to you. Anyway. All right, so we're going to go from a mean field model very simply to a network model. Let's just put on a network. Everyone's got thresholds again, and it's the same idea. And we're going to see something different. So this first big story from Granovetter is about, kind of gives the critical mass story, when things might take off and explode, and it's really just about the slope of that special function at 0. That's the key thing, right? When that slope goes above 1, you have a small thing can take off. When it's below 0, it gets damped. That's the big story for that one. Now you have network. Very different things are going to happen, and that's, well, surprising. But what happens is quite interesting. Okay, so now your individuals have this limited view. I'll have a little diagram in a second. We're going to check out these ones as well. So it took, well, I guess it's not long in the history of things, but 5 years before some of this stuff was sorted out really properly analytically, and this was quite beautiful. It's not just a bunch of math. There's a different thinking that goes on in sorting this out. There are a couple of other pieces that we've added over time that make it a simpler story. The math in here is a little obfuscatory. It's just what was being used and could still be used, of course. It's generating functions, which is a beautiful business, but it's not very transparent as to why you get a certain condition. So we're looking for a cascade condition. That's what we're looking for. When, given a network, given a mechanism, is this thing susceptible to one person switching on, right? Will one little, on average, spread? So there's the possibility that could happen, and then you want to know what the probability is. Is this thing vulnerable to exploding? That's a word we'll use again in a very specific kind of way. Right, this one says Gladwell is an idiot. Okay, all right. Okay. In a complicated way. Let's see. So now we have a network. It's going to be a fixed network because, of course, we have to start with something. It's going to be. We'll play with toy ones. We'll get to some more interesting ones with groups, and that will be something to play with soon. If we can get to it today, an individual has, again, this kind of structure we've had. They'll have K contacts, use the same kind of notation. Influence is reciprocal, right? So if there's a link between two individuals, they get a 1, sort of going in each direction. And you could have a directed network that changes that. So everyone has their own threshold. We'll see that, as I think I said the other day, it's enough to have everyone have the same threshold for it to be interesting, because people will have a distribution of friends, and that's enough to kind of make interesting things happen. Something that's happening that's built into this that is not always obvious, but we have to say all these things. You're always polling everyone around you. It's a discrete time model. So every time step, you have a clock, and you look again at everyone else, and then you make your decision. Everyone's got Ugg boots on, whatever it is. Okay, I'm going to put them on. So it's synchronous, discrete time. So synchrony is a very important assumption here. Maybe this is really, of course, it's a model. Maybe this is possible, reasonable for some of the things like rioting or marching against a dictator kind of thing. We were talking about that with Eastern Europe, where every morning you kind of come out and you have to make your decision again. Maybe you look to see what who's around, but you're not. You can't see the whole city. You're making some kind of decision, and everyone else is sort of doing that. And you get to the square or wherever you're going to start your march, and then you find out if that was a good decision, right? But there's sort of it's synchronous. That's an element of synchrony. And if it's asynchronous, you get to look at everyone, then you make your decision. That's different. And generally speaking, it's just a good thing to just have in your head. Probably said it. But models where you change from synchronous updating to asynchronous can be very different in behavior. Right. Okay. But that's what we're doing to start with. And you can change these things. So it's simply going to be the case that when you have some fraction of active nodes around you who have some behavior, so it's AI, we'll say is the number of nodes around you and your friendship ring that are on, divided by your total number of friends. If that exceeds your threshold, you're on. That's what we had before. And this is an assumption that can be relaxed, but it took about 10 years, I guess, to relax it, which is once people are on, it's mechanically just a bit easier to let them just stay on. So it's an SI model. So if they're susceptible, they switch on, then they stay on, even if their friends, for some reason, don't turn off. But they can't in this model. That's not going to happen. Once your friends are on, they're on. Once you're on, you're on. So it's only going one way. All right, so here's a little example. Everyone has a threshold of a fifth or 0.2. And there are arrows in here just simply because that's the transmission. But the idea is in general, for these simple models, that it goes both ways. So A has 5 contacts. One of them is on. And they're like, yep, so we're going to turn on in this time step. And then you can look at these characters. This one will turn on. One of their 3 friends is on, so it exceeds a 5th. It's not enough here for D. It's going to be enough for C, but not for B. So in the next time step, we have this. C's on, E's on. So it was 1 out of 5 here. And now there's 2 out of 8. 2 out of 8 for B, so they will switch as well. But E remains resilient to this. So if you start to think about, all right, so I've got some network. I want to think about how this thing is going to play out. These nodes will be quite special in terms of whether things take off. A, E, and C. And we'll call them vulnerables. They're the ones that just need one friend to be on. And the reason they matter is because random networks, as we've talked about, random networks locally are pure branching networks. That's a really important thing, right? So locally, they're just branching networks. There are no loops in them. So if a contagion is spreading in here, say it's coming in from this side, it's not going to hit this character, right? We want to see if we're thinking only about when it takes off. There's a complication of this later, but if we're thinking of this taking off, it's really about if it hits this one and turns them on. The question of whether these turn on or not is really just about that one link here and that one link here and that one link here. It's not coming from another direction. Early on when it's spreading. You turn someone on, it's pure branching structures around you. So it's all about whether you are vulnerable to one of your friends turning on. And we'll call those people vulnerables, right? Or those individuals or nodes, whatever this thing is. So is this okay mechanically? Yeah? All right, so that's a fair game. Of course, we'll put on a pure random networks to start with. We've talked about different kinds. So there's the Erdos-Renyi random networks, which we know don't exist in the world. That's a good place to start, just because they're, we understand them. Poisson degree distributions. You can put them on random networks with arbitrary degree distributions. That's an easy transition, so we'll do that as well. Okay, so random networks. So we're going to have this, as I said, P sub k, right, is our probability that a node has degree k. Nodes are randomly wired up. We had a little piece about how to do that algorithmically. And we want to figure out when things are going to take off. So it's a cascade, we'll call it a cascade condition. What's the condition for spreading? So that's just a simple condition. Is this thing susceptible as a whole? And then you could talk about the probability of spreading. So if random individual is activated, that's important, what's the probability that an activation will spread over a network? It'll be global. It'll be something you can see from space, right? That you look at the whole thing, there's a non-zero fraction is infinity. We talked about that with percolation, right? So something could percolate, but it could be, visually, might be just a sort of a small amount of it, but it's macroscopically large, is the right terms. So, and we're getting at this, is the individual that's activated at the start, is that the key thing? What are the features of the network itself? What are the features of the spreading mechanism? Right? And as humans, we tend to, we'll want to focus on that individual who starts the thing, because that gives you a better story. But we'll see it's about the whole system. All right, so this is a very abstract rendering of a network. There's a whole network here. Right, this is everyone. This is the world. We'll call it omega. This is how this. I'm going to try and explain how this works in general. What we're going to find is there may be, doesn't have to be, but there may be inside these random networks a critical mass. So it will be very much like this Granovetter thing, but a different version. It's a network version, but that same idea. There's a critical mass in here, in the sense that all of these ones are vulnerables. They only need, right, in this little sub-component of the network, all of them just need, if one of their friends turns on, they turn on. So if you just touch this little sub-network, it will spread through it, for sure, right? Because it's a little random network, has a random kind of structure, because they'll all turn on. And then outside of that is what we'll call a triggering component, which includes the critical one, plus it's got some, I've drawn our matches here, right? It extends beyond it potentially, which means a node out here may have 100 friends. It's not a vulnerable node, according to the mechanism. That will depend on the mechanism. But say this is quite a resilient node. If one of its friends turn on, it doesn't turn on, right? It's not like that. But it could have friends in this vulnerable component. So if you start there, boom, it spreads through here. Fair enough? So either you start in the critical component, spread through it, or you start with someone who's connected to it but themselves is a resilient character. All right, so there's an initial spreading. It's a little more complicated, but there's an initial spreading that gets through this critical component, and then suddenly you'll have, there's this piece here, which is somewhat askew to the triggering component, but someone out here may have 3 friends in here, or 4 friends in here, or 5 friends in here. And if they do, you know, which could mean that their threshold's exceeded. Right? They're not vulnerables. They need more than 1 friend. But if there's a big mass in here, so if they have 4 friends in there that switch on, and they have a threshold of, I don't know, a quarter, and they have 16 friends, then they'll go as well. So there's this idea of it's a pretty bad situation, right? Because it means that 1 person can switch on and essentially create a critical mass. You don't. So it is very, 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 very susceptible to something exploding. It creates an effective critical mass, which then, spreading from that, gets to some larger size. How are we doing with that? Plausible? Now, it could be this doesn't exist. There's no vulnerable component. There aren't enough of these. So if everyone's friends with everyone else, for example, it's a large network. Everyone's got hundreds and thousands of friends. The contagion mechanism, particularly social type 1, doesn't spread, right? Because you've got 1,000 friends, one of them starts wearing Ugg boots, and you're like, whatever, right? You don't even notice it. You need hundreds of them to do it, perhaps, before you're like, okay, fine. Ugg boots are done. I guess I should use something else. All right, but you know, as the thing becomes more and more sparse, what's happening is people are in that kind of network. People have less information coming into them. So they're more susceptible. You know, if you're someone with 1 friend and you just follow whatever they do, if they're not wearing Ugg boots, you're not wearing Ugg boots. If they wear them, you're like, sure, you know, in this model. Okay. So ignorance sort of facilitates spreading is what's going on here. All right. Okay, we'll get to a mathematical statement, which is exciting for you. Okay. So it turns out, let me say this too. This bit was solved in Duncan's paper, 2002. We actually figured out this. I figured out this bit sort of in some casual calculations a little later. Didn't really publish it, but Gleason did this work, and this is hard. It's quite beautiful. It's a different story. So we'll get to it. And it turns out the intuition you have about these vulnerables sort of falls away a little bit when you start putting groups of people in there. That becomes a different game as well. So mean field, where everyone watches everyone else, is different to the network version, which has various flavors. And your intuition, which you didn't have, but you gain, sort of doesn't always keep going. Right. All right. Okay, it's a super cool model. Okay, so let's see. So, yeah. So instead of, again, this is a bit of a narrative thing, we like to think of individuals and we can tell their stories, you know, such and such is ill, and we want to see how many people they get sick. That's exactly the R0 encapsulation, right? The reproduction number. It's all about 1 sick person. So that's sort of this to this kind of story. But actually this isn't very good. You really want to see, here's an edge. Over and over with networks, it's better to think about edges. So there is an infected person back here, but what we're thinking about is this is an infected edge. This connection carries an infection. And then it hits someone here, and we're interested in, do they switch, right? Does this one switch or not? And then, if it does, then all of these outgoing edges that they have in their social network are infected. So what does 1 infected edge beget? Does 1 infected edge get, on average, 10 new? That would be bad, right? So if an infected edge gets at least 1 more infected edge, on average, somewhere in the whole, you know, when you look at the whole network, then the thing is spreading. So this is different to the reproduction number. I mean, it's adjacent to it, obviously, but we're talking about, here's an edge, it's coming from someone who's infected. Does that create, on average, more than 1 new infected edge? And if it does, then it's going to have exponential takeoff. But conceptually, this is the better way to think about it, and mathematically, much, much closer. Right, and the approach I'll give you, we can make horrible things, but the approach I'll give you is something where there's a clear story in the way it's laid out. Yeah? Right? Mathematics is full of things, we've talked about this, where all the monks have explored space and they realize you have to jump over this thing and then pull a twig, and there's all these kind of weird little things you have to do to get from A to B. A lot of mathematical proofs have that feel to them. But this is more of a physics kind of story, like infection. We'll be able to use words for things. Okay, so that's it, right? So if an infected link gets at least one more infected link coming out of it on average, then things are going to spread. And so this is the story I've been telling you, vulnerables, right? So the nodes that can be switched on, will be switched on, could be probabilistic, but can on average be switched on when one of their friends is active, they're the vulnerables. I mean, the naming is okay. We don't say non-vulnerables or certainly not invulnerables. The others are vulnerable to 2 or 3 or 4. That's what they need. They need more hits. It is, and this is a hard thing to think about, how it's going to actually spread. So you can imagine the vulnerables sort of falling over like dominoes, but at the same time, now and then you'll get someone who needs 2 and they'll fall. So it's sort of a mixed thing. We couldn't figure this out. Gleason did it. All right. So the vulnerability condition is simply this. So you have a threshold. You're a node. You have a threshold, whatever it is, a third, 10th. And then it's simply 1 divided by your number of friends, because we're thinking about 1 active friend. So 1 divided by your number of friends, if that's greater than your threshold, then you're vulnerable, right? So if you have 5 friends and you have a threshold of 0.1, a 10th, then you're vulnerable because 1/5 is greater than a 10th. So as soon as 1 person turns on, your threshold's exceeded. And because now we're not looking at a huge population, we're not looking at bazillions of people. People aren't saying, oh, the fraction the fraction of people doing something is 0.03, whatever it is. We're not doing that. We're saying there's 0 people doing it around me, or 1/5 of the people around me, or 2/5, or 3/5. This is a very discrete structure. I mean, a discrete structure is kind of emerged and it changes the math. So does that make sense? It's a very simple thing. 1 divided by your number of friends has to be greater than your threshold, or equal to your threshold, and then you're vulnerable. You're one of these characters who will just say yes as soon as someone else does something. And you can flip this around, so this means the number of, so if we turn this upside down, so we have ki is less than or equal to 1 divided by your threshold, and because this has to be discrete, we'll put a floor on that. So you simply you take the inverse of everyone's threshold, divide it, take the floor of it, and check this, and all of those are in. And so you can, okay, so if everyone has the same threshold, let's say everyone has the same threshold, it's 0.2, right? Everyone has 0.2. So 1 divided by 0.2 is 5. So that means every node with degree less than or equal to 5 is vulnerable. So it's all of this is a very important thing, it's all the ones who have, so 0 doesn't work because you're not getting information, but 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 contacts, they're the vulnerables. And the 5s will be very important. But and then if you've got 6 or more friends, you're not vulnerable, right? You need 2 hits. Okay? Okay, and I showed you this picture before, and this is a statement of it. For things to take off, you need a global cluster, or a macroscopic cluster of vulnerables. Right, so you get this big network, you need a clump in there somewhere of vulnerables that are connected to each other, such that if it gets touched, if one of it turns on, one of these nodes turn on, or a node that's adjacent to it turns on, the thing goes boosh. And you at least get all of those ones turning on. Exciting. So this is a critical mass story, and we've moved from having the mean field case, we just had a critical mass. Somehow you had to turn on at least half of them before the social spreading part took over. Right? This actually gives you a mechanism for how one node could lead to the whole thing spreading. Now, this doesn't mean that node is special. That just means they're part of a gullible group, whatever the framing you want to use, a susceptible group, a vulnerable group. Anyone in there could start it. Right? So it's a part of the forest, if you like, that's very dry and ready to go. Yeah. All right. Okay, so let's do the following a link thing. Okay, so we've thought about this a little bit before. So we're going to jump into our network. We have a random network. We're going to jump into the network, find a random edge. So it's not selecting by nodes at all. We find a random edge. So we put all the edges down in a big list, and we just choose from them, jump onto an edge, and then run randomly in one direction, and then we bump into someone over here. And we talked about this. What's the probability that this node has degree k? And because there are k ways to get to that node, right? You could have jumped on this edge, or this edge, or this edge, or this edge, or this edge. You get k times p sub k. We'll call it qk. This is the probability of an edge leading to a node of degree k, a random edge. So, okay, this is a good thing. So that k pushes things out, right? It gives the higher degree nodes a better chance. Yes?
What's the intuition behind mapping it to an edge instead of a node?
What's the
intuition? It seems like
It shouldn't matter.
Well, it would if that initial node had two edges connected to it, and it directed the for two.
Yeah. The problem with the with just talking about nodes is, I mean, eventually you have to couple it to the first node. But you know, this node is infected. It's the first one. It's got all these edges going out. And the structure that keeps getting repeated is that you think about amplifying is this piece here. This is the transition, right? This one comes in, it becomes infected or not, and then more edges go out. And then now you can join these things together. Here's another one. Right, you can use that as your little set of building blocks. The problem with just thinking about a node is that once you get to here, you've got that one going back that way as well. It doesn't. I mean, you can equally kind of frame it in that way. It's just clearer, I think. Obviously not. It's clearer to say it like this because these are the little building blocks of the spreading. Edge comes in, that's infected, hits this node, edges come out potentially, and then you repeat that. Edge in, node, potentially. You know, this is the way we can kind of break the spreading action into pieces that are the same, have the same form. Because you can't cut a node, like you can't cut a node. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. So these are all the same. Yeah, so they all have the same. Right. So that's going there. So mathematically, what you do is you couple all of these kinds of structures together, and then you eventually tag it to an initial node. Yeah, so mathematically, that's how it works. But this is the figuring out how if it's going to take off or not is really this part. The probability it takes off, you know, is connected to that initial one. How many friends it has. So a node that has more friends is a better place to start with, and we'll try to tackle that as we go along. It is true, but there's a limit to that actually, and in some cases, some kinds of spreading mechanisms, the initial node is having more friends actually is worse, which is counterintuitive. It's very strange. You would think just go and target the ones with the most friends, but you can certainly make quite reasonable mechanisms that and network structures where that's not true. Exciting. Okay, so this little business here, I've just tried to explain it over here. We have k ways to connect to a node with degree k. And the normalization, well, we've got kpk, let's sum that thing up. It's just the mean degree, right? That's actually just the mean degree by observation. So we can say it's the mean degree. So the probability, and I've called it q sub k over there, probably that a linked node has degree k that you're going to is kpk divided by the mean. Which again, you know, you take p sub k, you multiply by k, so you're pushing, you're getting a new distribution which has more weight to higher degree nodes. So you take your distribution, whatever it is, let's say it's Poisson, multiplied by k, and you're starting to get, moving it out here. Which makes sense, right? So you've got a better chance of connecting to nodes of higher and higher degree. All right, so here's the basic thing we have to write down for our vulnerables. The probability that a node of degree k is a vulnerable, right? Because we're going to let them have, so we're going to make our network, and then we're going to select from another distribution which we had before, the same distribution, f of phi, we're going to select thresholds and give them to everyone. It's going to be not connected to their degree. You could do that. Fine. So a degree k node is susceptible if its threshold is between 0 and 1 over k. Think about it a little bit, right? So it means threshold is less than 1 over k. So it means that if one of its friends turns on and its threshold is less than 1 over k, that means, right, it sees 1 over k of its friends is greater than its threshold, which is less than that. So they're low threshold nodes. All right, so that little integral gives you the probability that a node of degree k is susceptible and or is vulnerable. And because, and I'm saying this, where everyone has a deterministic response function, right? So they have this jump, right? There's one here. So that means that these are definitely turning on. Right? They absolutely do turn on. So this fraction is, this is a fraction, it's not probabilistic. This is a, I mean, it's probabilistic in the sense that you're hitting a node of degree k, and its threshold has been chosen, but they do always turn on. Nodes either turn on or off. Okay, and then this is the bit that helps. If this node is of degree k, and it switches on, there are k minus 1 new infected edges. Right. So that's a simple thing. And if it's not vulnerable, no more, right, it's a dead end. And so your active edge goes to 0. All right, so let's put that together in an equation. So this is the expected number of edges that an infected edge begets, new ones that it begets, right? So it's coming in, it's infected, what does it get? So we'll put it all together and we'll call it like a reproduction kind of ratio thing. It's an R. These things can be more and more complicated if you have correlated networks and all sorts of banana pants things. Okay. Okay, so let's put these pieces together. So this is the probability that your edge is hitting a degree k node. This is the probability that that node is vulnerable. And in the case that it's vulnerable, you get this many more new edges. That's your growth. So this is the probability that you hit a vulnerable node of degree k, and this is the weight that it gets. It gives you k minus 1 new ones. And on the other hand, you can hit the same thing, a degree k node. This is the probability that it's not vulnerable. And then, in that case, you get 0 new things. So this just gets wiped out. I'm just sort of putting everything there. So everything is being counted up. So there's 0 here, failure. So this all goes away, and we just get this pretty clean statement, I think. So this is structural, this is about the disease, and this is structural again. They're very clear pieces. What happens, you can get to this result through various other means. Well, let me say this. Okay, this is the cascade condition. You need that quantity, this R, to be greater than 1. This is the expected, so an infected edge. If it produces, on average, at least 1 new infected edge, then the thing is going to take off. We've got these pieces. And it's, you can see these pieces. So you could play around with this and do different things. You can rewrite it mathematically. You can do all sorts of things. But they're not transparent. That's a bit of a problem. You can get to it from finding when an eigenvalue is greater than 1 in some matrix. There's all sorts of ways to get to this, but the equation you end up with can be mathematically obtuse, basically, right, if you've gotten to it from a funny angle. Let me show you a couple of pieces that come from this. So imagine it doesn't matter what degree you have for your susceptibility, the probability that you turn on. It's just beta. We're just going to say, independent of your degree, this is a disease-like thing rather than a social contagion. You just have some probability of being infected, given that one of your neighbors is on. Right, so one of your neighbors is on. There's some probability that eventually with time you will, because they stay on, you get a bunch of hits. What's probably that you turn on? So we'll just say it's beta, and we can just pull that thing out. Beta. We're going to pull it out, and we have this little blob here. So it's just this guy, and then this sort of 1 over beta. We can put it out here. If we say everyone gets infected, just this thing just spreads for free, then that would actually get back to a graph theory problem. And we're saying, is there a giant component? So this is kind of a nice thing to fall out. This is the condition for whether a giant component exists or not in a random network. And look at this. This is the way to rewrite this thing. Get rid of these fun things. Wow, that's good. How you doing over there? Are you communicable? Okay. You brought your own snacks. Okay. Good to know. Contracting Ebola for a project was, you know, kind of. Yeah. All right. Not fun. So, what the thing you mean? Let's see. Okay, yeah. So this is what happens. You end up with things like this. So this is, you could write this as k minus 1, k, pk. So sum over these things. We'll put the average degree over here. This is really, you could write this as, this is the average of k minus 1, k equals this thing. And then we could pull this in here and you could write this, k minus 2 times k. And in fact, I guess this was greater than. So greater than 0. That's kind of cute, right? Why not? We're messing around mathematically to find a more compact statement. So you take your degree distribution, you multiply it by k minus 2 times k, sum it all up, and if that's greater than 0, the thing spreads. But this is a meaningless. This is a meaningless kind of business. I mean, I think this is meaningless, but you will see this in papers because it falls out of some mathematical stuff, and it's fine to do that, but it has no. You've lost the physical structure. So we've kept the physical structure in this statement. Yes, we could rearrange things here and so on, but we're going to keep them in their boxes. Okay, I think that's good, very healthy. Yeah, you're excited. All right, let's see what goes on when we look at different random networks. We have our cascade condition. This is just whether something will take off, right? This is not about how big it will be. Okay, this is it's not exactly from, it's a version of what Duncan put into his paper. And there was a couple other pieces. Very interesting things happen here. So what we're going to say here is, let's look at pure random networks, good old Poisson random networks, the things that exist only in mathematicians' heads, and we'll vary them across here. So average degree of 1. Remember this? This is where you suddenly get a giant component for pure random networks. 2, 3, 4. We've had these are some examples. That's a degree 4 random network. I mean, it's a hairball pretty quickly, right? But on average, everyone has 4 friends here, which isn't a lot, but it's a hairball. Obviously, as you go further out, this just becomes a more, something involving a cat as you get further out here. All right, what is happening? So, the thing that we just talked about was vulnerables, whether there's this vulnerable component. So when there's a low average degree, the thing is just not connected enough, right? There's no giant component, nothing can spread. It doesn't matter what your mechanism is. It can't spread through the network because they're all isolated pieces. There are little blobs, some will have, there'll be 10 in 1 and 3 and 2, but nothing can spread. So the final size, or the average final size, which is what this is, between 0 and 1, the average final size of the spread, again from one node starting off the thing, is 0. Right? Nothing can spread, it doesn't matter what it is. Now, this is a situation where everyone has a threshold of 0.18. So this is a case where nodes of degree 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are vulnerable. 6 and higher, they need 2 hits. And then they need 3 hits if they have 12. If you have 12 friends, you need 3 hits. Regular, I'll say 13, 12, I think. Okay, so we're filling in the network. We're making more and more dense networks as we get here and as we go along here. So as we go past 1, now we do have a giant component. And we also have inside that a vulnerable component. Right? So it's a bunch of nodes that have degree 5 or less in this case that are connected, such that if anyone starts the game there, or anyone who's connected to them starts the game, it spreads through it. And that's what this plot is here. It's the fraction of vulnerables in the largest vulnerable component. So as you get more and more connected, this actually goes up and then starts to go down, because nodes that had 5 friends now have 6, so they're out of the game. And eventually up here, there are no vulnerable components. It's dense enough that there might be one there by themselves or one over there, but there isn't a macroscopic one. So there isn't this critical mass. So this is a pretty interesting kind of transition story, right? Out here, no one's connected enough. Here, they're 2 connected. So the threshold. So there are 2 things going on. One is you simply just can't communicate. They're all vulnerable down here. They have only a few friends. If one of them turned on, they would turn on. But globally, it's not connected enough. Here, it's globally connected enough. But now you've got all these people who have 10, 20, 30 friends. They're resilient, right? They aren't going to just jump on the bandwagon because one person turned on. So the switches here are different. Now, at the same time, here's the size of the final spread, if it takes off. For ones that take off, that's what this should be, I guess. So this is the if it takes off. Now, to start with, there's this critical mass. It's basically the same size as the giant component. It's the same thing. So if it spreads in there, that's all it gets to. In the middle region, you start to have something where the critical mass is here, but it's also part of a larger connected body. So if you start it off here, it goes whoop, through all these, and it gets some of these ones that need 2 friends to be on, 3 friends to be on, 4 friends to be on. It spreads to them. Eventually this starts to pull away, and you get this very strange case where, if you look at this network, most nodes are beginning to be non-vulnerable, right? They have more than 5 friends, which is the condition. They have more than 5 friends. The average is 6. So if you look at it, you think, okay, there's one with 6, they have 7, they're not going to switch on. But there's a tiny little vulnerable component in this thing. Just a little one, but it's still something you can see from space sort of thing. There's a little one. It's a very small fraction down here. If that thing gets hit, it spreads through it, and then that turns out to be enough to spread through the whole thing. So it's a very strange, it's a very bad. So this one, when it's spreading through, it's like all these vulnerables. Like they need one friend, sure, so they all switch. This case is horrific. So this is a robust yet fragile thing. Most of the time when you poke the thing, nothing happens. But if you get the right spot, it'll go through that tiny little critical mass, and then there'll be nodes connected that have 2 friends there, or maybe 3, but they have 2 friends, they switch, and then you start to get ones that need 3 friends, ones that need 4. I mean, you're getting them at all different rates, but then it starts to go out, and eventually you get everyone. So this is a strange business. This is it's a very dangerous thing. So this points to, it gives you, again, giving kind of stories, a toy model that another robust yet fragile thing. The thing looks fine. Why does it explode? Why did this thing explode? Why did the Eastern power grid go kaboom? It's a pretty hard thing to figure out. Still, I think, debated, actually. 2003 or 4, was it? Yeah. That's still debated. Pretty weird. This is pretty weird. This is a weird thing. So, final size is the important thing. Out here, nothing happens. Right? Nothing happens. For this mechanism, nothing happens. So robust yet fragile. And what you can think of too is, well, let's take random networks out here and then take away their edges. Right? Go from a highly connected one, like clean away edges, remove edges, still passing through some sort of random network space. You get to here and you're thinking, well, there's nothing going to spread in this thing, but suddenly it's actually crossed the threshold and become vulnerable collectively in this kind of dangerous way. So it's ignorance facilitates spread, is the story. You're not taking in signals from everyone at all anymore. You're starting to only know 5 people, or 4 people, or 3 people. And that can allow the thing to spread. So very weird, very different behavior to the Granovetter one. Here's a generalization from that. I've just showed you this little Cascade story. So what that was a slice here. This is average degree, and this is the threshold of everyone, 0.18. So now we could play around with the threshold. We could lower the threshold, so more nodes are now susceptible. We could increase it, and this is a quarter, so you need to have 1 in 4 of your nodes on. And this gray part here shows you where cascades are actually possible, right? So cascades are possible between here and here. That window broadens and broadens, and it's very sensible. As you lower the threshold, more people are vulnerable. If you move the threshold down to 100th, 100th, then nodes with degree 100 now vulnerable. So it's more. So this is another thing you can do. You can tune that, right? And eventually, this clips off. Once your threshold is, if everyone has a threshold of a half, nothing will ever spread on these random networks with this pure threshold model. Now we'll come back to this later on, but one of the things you might want this to open up, right? You might want to change the system so that you've got a bigger range because you like the spreading. You might want to close it down because you don't like the spreading. Does that make sense? This guy is kind of slotted here. Yeah. 3D, always dangerous. All right. I know. All right, fine. Okay. All right, so let me see if I can explain this one. So we've had these mean field ones, and we've had the network ones. Now the network one goes to the mean field as you add more and more friends, right? Eventually, if everyone's watching everyone else on an all-to-all network, that's the mean field version. That's the Granovetter version. We're back to that. All right, because now you've got your n people in the thing. You're looking at n-1, and they're all looking at n-1. It's a little bit tiny off, but basically you know what the fraction of people are doing. You have your measure of them gives you the population's behavior. Okay, so all-to-all networks are here. And we've seen these two examples. This is a bit of a funny example. This is a critical mass model. Here's that integral. This is the cumulative distribution. Here's the distribution of thresholds. Right? So if you integrate this thing, you get this shape. And the iterative map here says, okay, there's an unstable fixed point here. If we started with anything above that, everyone spreads. It spreads. And if it starts below, it disappears. So this is back to Granovetter. This is the internal stable fixed point version. So again, that shape, there are gullables. There are ones that are more resilient. You integrate that, you get this shape. And so anything that starts above 0 will take off. And everything that starts above will go back down to here. So that's what those stories are. So you can imagine what you do is you take these, imagine these as networks now. Everyone has there's a million people in the network. Everyone is friends with everyone else. But then you start pairing away. You start taking the edges away. And you move it out to a network story. And in fact, you're actually coming in along this axis. I guess maybe I should put it on this. You're coming in along this axis because this is average degree. You're moving in this way. You're looking at, right? Out here is the all-to-all networks. Way, way, way out there. You're coming in, and random networks, the question we've asked here is what does one node do? And so one node, one over capital N, 1 over a gigantic number here, nothing, right? That doesn't ever spread. It's a critical mass one. A tiny little guy here, 1 over N in this, theoretically, yes, it always takes off. You just need epsilon in there, right? It just always takes off. So as you come in from this, you're coming in from this behavior where nothing spreads. And so you think, okay, fine, this is fine. I can still take more edges away. This isn't bad. I don't really understand what I'm doing, why I'm doing this, but you actually get to this strange point where you get to a transition. You have this boop, this fragile, robust yet fragile system that doesn't look bad but goes boom. And then eventually in this part, it's reliably spreading. You've got a good chance of hitting that vulnerable component. This one is different because it always spreads. As you add more and more edges, it's always spreading. Because this threshold distribution is such that there's a bunch of gullables and they'll always take off. It's a different kind of game. So that one goes right out to here. Happiness. Okay. All right. So what's going on? So average, so low degree, no cascades and these connected networks. They're just not connected enough. Nothing will spread. Right. So no clusters. Nothing can spread. When they're well connected, and this is for this uniform threshold model, well connected, there's a ton of, it's fantastic, there are tons of connections, but nothing spreads anywhere. A disease on those things is fantastic in a simple model. Everyone's connected to everyone, you drop a disease in, it's a very simple, not very good model, but everyone's communicating with everyone else, so it just goes through it. But the threshold models are different, right? There is an opposite kind of thing. Someone has lots of friends, they're a blocker. So hubs become blockers in these models instead of spreaders. They do the opposite thing. They actually, defeat the thing. Which is not unreasonable, right? Oprah is not just going to randomly repeat everything that, some crazy person in the audience says, and it's like, sure. They can't do it. All right, but in the middle we have there's a global cluster of, and that's the key thing, there's this global cluster of vulnerables. The network has that structure in it. That makes it susceptible, right? You can hit that thing or something adjacent to it, it spreads through that, and that then is this kind of next level critical mass. So an individual is kind of a critical mass in that, but it could be any of them. It spreads to that, and then it could go beyond. All right. Okay. It's more skateboarding. There's no way I can get through all this. Okay, the final size. I want to set this up. What do we need a break? Right. Okay. This is about, that's all about whether it would take off. And I did show you a plot of the final size, but actually that was, that's just numerical, right? It's kind of an odd thing, just numerical. So we want to find how far this thing spreads. This hard question that we have no idea about for real contagions. I was speaking to a reporter this morning for about an hour about this too. Why can't we predict success? And that's going to be actually the next couple of lectures. But we discount social behavior completely, right? So Mona Lisa is famous because of intrinsic things. Harry Potter is famous because of all these intrinsic things. There's no stopping us. I mean, we want to have algorithms that will find the next best song. We put the song into the black box, and it pops out a sort of a, here's a chance that it's going to succeed. Based purely on the song thing, right? Just purely on the details of the song. Okay. All right. So here's the problem with this. Figuring out, so we thought about what happens when it spreads through this initial cluster, and they're all sort of simple. It's got this nice branching structure. But then you're going to start to hit nodes that need 2 friends or 3 friends and 4 friends. How does that play out? And if you think of it in that way, if you think of spreading away from the origin, from the start of it, it just doesn't work. It's very hard. You can't quite see how this happens, because you kind of want to say, well, we get all the vulnerables, and then we get the ones that need 2 hits. But that's not true. They're interleaved with each other, which is hard. All right. So it was a beautiful piece of work by Gleason and Carlene, and they were thinking a little bit more about, well, what happens if we have a seed size that's fractional? We start off with 10% of the nodes are on, or 1% are on, instead of just one node. And there are, that's good questions for both of them, right? Because you might seed a marketing campaign, like just throw down people who are infected, or, pay them money to do the thing you want, or do you do that in groups? Should you sort of pay a whole group to behave in a certain way, or should you educate a group in a certain way to help spread something? There's more work here. So a very valid kind of question. Okay, let's think about how this works, and I'll give you a little picture of why this is sort of the opposite story to the taking off thing. Okay, so we're going to, instead of one node, it's going to be randomly turning on a fraction phi naught at time t. So just randomly they're on. Right? And phi is the thing we've been using, so it's phi naught, phi 1, phi 2. So local branching structure is a big deal again. And now we're going to think about what happens. We're just going to look at one node in the whole network. Just focus on one node and see how it could turn on eventually. So it could be that it turns on straight away at the start because it's just randomly chosen. It could be that its neighbors, one of them was switched on, or 2 of them were switched on at the start, and it's vulnerable to that. You have to. Right? It may need, and this node may need 2 hits, 3 hits, 4 hits, 5 hits. Okay, this is what I said. So t equals 0. It could be one of the seeds. If t equals 1, it wasn't a seed, but enough of its friends turn on in the first time step to exceed its threshold, given the fraction of friends that are on. T equals 2, it could be that it's friends of friends that turned on, and then it's gone to their friends, and now it's to them. So it's that's the horizon for being turned on in 2 time steps, being ignited in 2 time steps. It depends on your friends and your friends' friends. What happened to them? And t equals n, then you just keep going out. You build a ring around this node, you need to look at the history of all the nodes around it, everything around it, out to n time steps. Okay, so here's I've got a couple of pictures to set it up. So imagine red is on, so this is t equals 0, and we're going to have a third. And we're worried about this character here. And there's some other stuff going on here that we will imagine doesn't really pull in. I have another plot, so we'll do it. All right, so these ones are all on. If you see, this one has 3 friends, so that one's going to switch on. This one's also going to switch on because there's 3 friends. This one has 4, so that's not going to work. So at the next time step, they've switched on. Now this one has 2 out of its 4 friends. This one has 1 out of its 2 friends, so they're both going to switch on. This one says 2 out of its 3, so it will switch on. It also went back this way, so we'd have to think about that. This one isn't going back this way because it still has 4 friends, so it's not getting there. There could be other behavior, but and now we have 2 out of 5. So in the next time step, it will switch on. So we need to mathematically encode, tell this story. And incredibly, actually, it works out that you can actually get not just the final size, but in fact the complete trajectory of it. You get the fraction run at time 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You in fact get the complete solution with this. Quite beautiful. All right, let's do a more elaborate one. Xfig. So this is active at time t equals 0, the red ones. And we're worried about this character in the middle. Again, it's going to be a third. Wow. And this one has 9 friends, so it's going to take a while. And you can go through and look to see if this is all correct. But yeah, so yellow was a 1 in 3. This was a 1 in 3. This is going to have that same thing. This one switches on. So that was the little piece we showed before. So there's advances being made. Now it started off with 1 friend being on. This looks like 2 out of 5. So that one's going to switch now. So it's starting to. It's crossed the threshold. So 4 out of 9 friends are on, and it goes on in the next time step. But the change was, here it was enough to think about edge begetting edges. That worked. This is now about nodes. You definitely want to think about a node, although the story is still an edge story. But you want to think about this node like what's coming into it. How is it being attacked from all sides? So if it didn't switch on at this point, this t equals 5 would include, you'd have to include the history of the next layer out. T equals 6, the next layer out. This analysis won't work if you, you have to think about it and do something else. It doesn't work necessarily straight away for if they can switch off, if they can recover. So you can see the horrible complication if they recover. You have to be remembering that. Okay, so that's the first statement. It works for all sorts of contagion processes, not just the threshold one. You get the whole time evolution, and you can get probably the node of degree k switches on as a function of time. So it's quite specific. Okay, and you can do asynchronous updating too. So it's pretty fantastic. But this is basically what's going on. So for takeoff, we've got this. We think about one node, and we think about the edges coming out of it. Whether they spread. That's about whether it can take off or not. It's a kind of separate question. It can be addressed in all. This approach can get that as well, but in a very direct way, you think of it in a different way. So that's expansion. Contraction. This sort of thing. Contracting around a node is the extent of spreading. So they're answering these 2 very important pieces with a kind of, in a sense, opposite viewpoints. It's pretty cool. All right. Super cool. Okay, I'm going to just tell you how this works. We'll see how far we get. Okay, so this is the probability that a degree k node is active at time t. Well, it's the fraction, if you like, but it's really the probability. And then we'll have this guy. This is BKJ. This is a degree k node becomes active if j of its nodes are, j of its friends are active. Right, so the one we were interested in before was BK1. Right, what's the probability that a degree k node becomes active if one of its friends was on? That's all we needed to know. But now we need to know this full set of things. So we start off with everyone of degree k. Doesn't matter what their degree is because we're just randomly seeding them at time t equals 0. It's just this probability of seeding. All right, let's do the next step. Yeah. So This is the probability that j of a degree k node, so it's probably k choose j, it's got k friends, k choose j. This is the probability that they were seeded at time that j of them were on. So phi0 is the probability that you're on, so phi0 to the j, it's j successes, and then you need k minus j failures, just in that little ring around this initial node. Yep. And then there are k choose j ways of arranging those successes and failures. So that's the probability that exactly j of your friends were on. So that's one piece. And of course, there's the probability that the node itself was on at time t equals 0, right? So we have that. And then there's probably that it was not on at time t equals 0, it was 1 minus phi0. And then we put all these things together. So this is the probability that a degree k node is on at time step 1. Well, it was either on at the first time step already, that's just this random ignition thing, plus the probability that it was off there, so these are mutually exclusive things, that it was off. And then we have to sum through all these pieces. This is the probability that j of your friends were on. And then bkj is this probability that switches you on, based on your threshold construction. Right, so all of your friends could have been on, and then there's some probability that you're on, all sorts of things. Right, so it enumerates all of those pieces. Okay. Awesome. So that's phi. You actually have to think about edges as well. So it's the same thing again. It always becomes an edge problem. So we've got this node, we're worried about its friends turning on in the first time step, and then we have to think about edges. Right. Okay, so we need to know probably that an edge coming into a degree k node at time t is active. That's what this is. We'll call it phi sub t, theta t. And you know that the starting point for this is phi0, because that's just the probability that a node was turned on. Look at one of your friends, the probability that edge is coming from it is infected at time t equals 0 is the probability that it was turned on, which is phi sub 0. All right, so that's its initial condition. It's a similar looking story as we had for phi, but there's a slight modification. So, okay, right. So this is a probability that our node in the center of all of these things, right? So this node here in the center is on at time t plus 1, node I. Probably that was on at the first time step. Then it's on for all time. If it was off, then we encode this next piece as, well, it's the same template here, but now we have theta of t. So this is the probability that an edge coming into that degree k node, so it doesn't matter on its degree. An edge coming into that degree k node is on, j of them are on, and k minus j are off. Yeah. J are on, pointing in, and k minus j are off. So it has exactly the same form. But before we just had phi of 0 here and phi of 0 here. But we've let this run. So this is a fixed thing. If we can figure out how this thing changes, theta of t, then we just plug it into here. Wow, we're running out of time. So this is the adjacent thing, and these equations are always very similar to this. There's right. This is yes. Okay. This is okay. One more step. So we're averaging over all nodes. This is just the ith node. We can average over all nodes. Right. So we want nodes of degree k. We'll think of them. They occur with probably p sub k. We sum over all of them, and that gives us phi of t plus 1. So this is the fraction they're on. That's okay. Let me just tell you this. Yeah, it's lots of excitement. Okay. You have the same kind of build-up for this edge infection thing. So theta of 1 is the probability that node was infected at time 0, just for free, multiplied plus the probability that it wasn't, and then the change is this. You are connected to a node of degree k. That edge is connected to a node of degree k with this probability. It's the same thing we had before, kpk, divided by the average degree. And then there are k minus 1 other friends to that node, right? So this is k minus 1 choose j. This is the probability that they have the edges coming into them are on, right? Theta 0, so that's probably that they're on. This is probably that J of them on, the rest of them are off, and then it's probably that this guy was infected. I know I'm saying words. Okay, here's our infected character, potentially. And we're going out to one layer. This has degree K. There are K minus 1 out here, and all of them have the same probability of that edge being infected. This is going to give us theta 0 turns to theta 1. Yes, all right, I know. All of this generalizes, and I'll stop, all of this generalizes to these final results. I know. So this is just for the edges, the theta of t plus 1. This is exogenous because we switched it on the start, and this is a social effects. This is connecting edge to edge, right? So again, because it's edges, we have this increased probability of connecting to a higher degree node. We have this slight change in here because we're only thinking about k minus 1 other friends. And this is an iterative map here, right? Theta t equals to theta t plus 1. So we start with theta 0, we get theta 1. Put it back in here, we get theta 2. This thing iterates. This one, once you've got all your thetas, you put them into here, and that will tell you what's the probability of this guy being, what fraction are infected in the middle. So you can see those modifications here, right? This is an edge probability. This is a probability of choosing a node. I know there's a lot. And yeah, the end result. Okay, I'll stop. But the end result is this iterative map. And we can say, look, it's a function of theta of t with some initial condition. This iterates, this iterates, this iterates. I'll show you a little bit more about this on Tuesday. I know this is some intensity. Yeah, you get some funny behavior from this, which is interesting. And then we'll move on to groups. It's a different thing. That's actually going to be too hard to do anything analytic, so we'll just have simulations. I'll just show you the results from it. You get different behavior yet again, which is cool. Yeah, and then we'll study fame. We'll talk about fame. Success. Okay? So different stories. Different stories for different kinds of networks and systems. Okay, thank you.